Is coaching the problem for Indiana basketball?
You are Locked On Hoosiers, your daily podcast on the Indiana Hoosiers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It is the Locked On Hoosiers podcast. I'm your man, Jacob Goins. I appreciate you making Locked On Hoosiers your first listen each and every day. We're a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, which is your team every single day. I appreciate you, all the everydayers out there, those of you who are here Monday through Friday and on the weekends for reaction shows. I appreciate you. And if you're not one yet, please become one. We are growing like a weed over on YouTube, on the audio side of things as well. Anywhere you get your podcasts, we are free and available wherever you'd like to do that. If you're on YouTube, like the video, subscribe to the channel. We're growing there. Any of your podcasting platforms, be sure to subscribe. Turn on notifications across the board so that way you don't miss any episode. Today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. Is coaching the problem for Indiana basketball? I have seen this floating around since game one for Indiana, okay? I have seen this topic floating around, and I've seen it get brought up more times than not, really. And these types of conversations tend to come up after bad losses, right? They don't typically come up after you get a nice win like you did on the road against the Michigan Wolverines this past week. But they do typically come up when you have a really bad loss, like we just saw for Indiana against Auburn. Is coaching the problem with head coach Mike Woodson? Is he the issue for what happened on Saturday and what people are predicting could happen this coming Saturday and for the losses and maybe for the season not being as pretty as we had hoped to this point for this Indiana basketball team? Well, I've come up with some reasons why it absolutely could be the issue. There are so many things, and it starts for me with the in-game coaching, right? We understand that Mike Woodson is an NBA guy. He was in the NBA. He was coaching the NBA. He is an NBA guy, thick and thin, through and through, right? That is his bread and butter. And you can see there's a lot of times that he coaches this Indiana team like it's an NBA team. And the in-game coaching has been questionable, especially coming out of that game on Saturday, right? It's been on the questionable side of things where you just sit back and scratch your head sometimes. Why did he pull three of your big starters after you were up 22-10? Why did Malik Reneau, Khalil Ware, and Mackenzie Mbako get pulled after that? I don't know. Why did Mike Woodson not call a couple timeouts during that massive run for Auburn on Saturday? I don't know. I don't know why he didn't call a timeout, right? Why are you playing so many different rotations that sometimes just don't make sense? Like, look, I like Anthony Leo, and I know that you're short at the guard spot, but why is he playing in that game? He's not ready for that. He's not good enough for that yet. Why is he playing in that game? I mean, the in-game coaching strategies just don't make sense. And I mentioned the substitutions already, how that has not made sense to me almost all year. I mean, something will be working, and then he'll throw the whole bench out there. He'll take the whole starting five out, and we've seen so many times this year when the whole Indiana bench gets in, it's not pretty. I mean, it's just not pretty by any means. And no shade or hate to those guys. They're just not there yet. But why do that, right? Why put those guys out there? This isn't the Kentucky team of old with a platoon swap. This is Indiana with some really good starters and a bench that can be supportive if you use them in the right way. And when you do, you see what happened against Michigan, where your starters struggled. You use your bench properly, and they're the reason you win the ball game. Whereas on Saturday, you put them out there to die. You put your bench out there and said, good luck. Go. We gave you a lead. Keep it. Good luck. Have fun. That's an NBA way of thinking. And Indiana's bench is not to that point yet. They're just not. So that was a little questionable. The lack of mixing up formations, especially defensively. We hardly ever see Indiana change things up. But when we do, and when we have seen it, guess what? It's worked. The few times that Indiana has gone to a zone on defense, it has thrown teams completely off, right? And it has seemed to work. Mix up the formation, mix up your game plan a little bit, coach. You can't go into it with the same strategy that you do every game and just expect to win. You can't do that. And if you do, you're going to lose. You're going to lose more times than you win. And when you go up against a team that is equal level talented than you, or as you, I should say, or better, you're going to get out-coached and you're going to lose. And let's be honest here. Indiana got out-coached by Auburn on Saturday. Bruce Pearl out-coached Mike Woodson. Now, do I think that coaching was the reason Indiana lost? Let me rephrase that. Do I think that because of Bruce Pearl's out-coaching of Mike Woodson, that's the reason Indiana lost? No. That Auburn team was hot. We know that. We've talked about that. But I do think that Mike Woodson's coaching decisions led to a lot of that and led to that big run and led to that Auburn team getting hot. Would they have gone on that big of a run if he had made some better decisions and left some of his guys out there? I don't know. That's the big what-if game, right? That's my favorite game. Would that have happened? What if those guys had stayed in, or one of them or two of them have stayed in? Would Auburn have gone on that run? I don't know. If you change up the way you play defense and maybe change up your matchups a little bit, and you put a Trey Galloway on Aiden Harper, or on Aiden Holloway, excuse me, the freshman phenom for Auburn that went off. We didn't see that a ton. What happens if you put the bigger guard on him? Maybe he doesn't go off for 24 points and have his best day of his career so far in college. There's so many things like that in game that concern me. The other one quickly is the leadership part. This team right now, how many times have we talked about this? This team doesn't have the leader that they need on the floor. X is not here. He's not playing right now. His status is still questionable for Kansas, but as up to this point, the games he hasn't played, Indiana has struggled with leadership on the floor. And I think they're struggling to get leadership from off the floor too. This is not the NBA, man. This is not where you see the opponent go on a big run and you just let your team play through it and hope that they're going to come back and hope that they're going to make up for it. That doesn't happen in college basketball very often. And the few times that it does, this Indiana team is not there yet. They are not to that point. You cannot expect them to just battle through it. Just battle through it and hope that it works out and hope that you come back and hope that you just weather the storm. This team can't do that. And so when Auburn was doing that to you on Saturday and Mike Woodson just sat back and watched, that bothered me. And I'm not going to tell the guy how to coach. He makes a lot more money than I do. But there are certain things that have gotten Indiana fans fired up, myself included, and you just want to see some of those change, because if you continue to do those things when you go up against teams like Auburn and you start going up against those Big Ten teams like Ohio State, like Purdue, like Nebraska, if they continue to play well, like a Kansas that you're going to see on Saturday from the Big 12, you are going to get beat. That's why those things have to change. And I've seen a lot of you talking about the coaching from Mike Woodson. And I think that has to be brought up here. I'm not saying to get rid of the guy. I'm not saying that he's a horrible coach. I'm not saying that I'm better than him or I know more than he does. I'm not saying any of that. But there is no coach in America, in any sport, across any world, that is above criticism. And I think Mike Woodson is in that same boat. And I think he can learn a few things from that Auburn game. He's still a younger, newer college coach, right? I know he's not, you know what I'm saying here. I think there's some things he can learn from that. And I hope he does. I absolutely hope he does, because Indiana needs him. They need him to be a better coach for this team in particular and moving forward. Well, when we come back here on Locked On Hoosiers, we will talk about the latest bracketology. There's some surprises in here. I don't know if it's a typo or what, but we're going to talk about the latest bracketology from ESPN and Joe Lunardi coming up in just a second here on Locked On Hoosiers. You don't want to miss that. We've got some things to talk about when it comes to the latest bracketology. Today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers is brought to you by FanDuel. As the weather gets colder, the NFL offers stay hot on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, what are you waiting on? What are you doing? There's no better time to get in on the action. The app is easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to continue the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Before we talk about bracketology, want to continue to remind you that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Well, let's look at the latest bracketology from ESPN and Joe Lunardi. This was as of yesterday on Tuesday. And I mentioned there may be some typos here. There may be some confusion here about who is in bracketology. Your top overall seed is still Arizona. Your first team out is Oregon, and your last team in is Butler. And we know Indiana's kind of been on the bubble, kind of in, kind of out, not really knowing, right? But you look at the bubble as of right now. The last four byes are Mississippi State, Utah, Providence, and South Carolina. The last four in are New Mexico, Cincinnati, Washington, and Butler, so nothing crazy here yet. Your first four out, Oregon, Indiana State, UCLA, Nevada, and your next four out, Washington State, USC, TCU, and Virginia Tech. So that has changed quite a bit since the last time. And look, let me go ahead and say this too. We're going to be doing this each week. Okay, we're going to talk about the latest bracketology each and every week. And as it changes, we'll update you on the changes. And look, at the end of this, I want to go back and start comparing different weeks, right? I want to start going back and comparing how much this thing changes, because it's wild. And there's so many games to be played in college basketball. We're halfway through December? Like, it's going to change quite a bit. But that's what makes it fun. That's what I love about college basketball. You start looking around, and all of a sudden, Indiana is in the tournament as a 12 seed, as the automatic qualifier. Okay. I don't really know where that came from, but okay. Look, we'll take Indiana being in the NCAA tournament as a 12 seed. I think that's fair to say. I said yesterday, I think Indiana can finish top 5 in the Big Ten, and I think that gets you easily into the NCAA tournament if the conference can hold its own. And a 12 seed's not the worst case scenario. It's not great. It's the coveted historic 5-12 matchup, but I think you'd be okay. That has you slated up against number 5 Virginia as of right now. Other Big Ten schools, as we kind of look through the latest bracketology, Purdue still a 1 seed in your region. If you are Indiana, you have other Big Ten schools. There's not a ton, okay? There's only 6 Big Ten schools that are currently in the NCAA tournament bracketology, according to Joe Lunardi on ESPN. Northwestern is a 7 seed. You have Kansas as a 1 seed. I know it's not Big Ten, but a team that you obviously are going to be playing this Saturday. You have Kentucky in there as a 6 seed. Wisconsin's a 5 seed. Okay, there's another Big Ten school. Ohio State is a 7 seed. That's a drop. Okay, that's a drop. You have I already mentioned Purdue. I mean, just so many teams that are not in here that were to begin the season. Michigan State's obviously the big one. Here's an update. Auburn is a 5 seed now after what they did to us this weekend. So that's a big jump for Bruce Pearl and the Tigers. So overall, just not a pretty sight for the Big Ten, man. Just not a pretty sight at all. And you look at some of the other teams in here, Indiana has work to do. And whether you think they're in the tournament right now or not, that's up to you. Whether you care or not right now, that's up to you. It's December, middle of December. I get it. But we've talked about this. The Hoosiers got to get some wins. And here's the problem. As of right now, early on in this season, they don't really have that resume win. They have some nice wins. But the resume building win is not there yet. It's not. You had a chance to get it against Auburn. That didn't happen. But luckily, you have a chance to do that this weekend. You have Kansas coming to town, and you have a chance to take down a top 5 team in the country, a number 1 seed in the current NCAA tournament in bracketology. You have a chance to do that. You're at home in Bloomington at Assembly Hall. You have a chance to do that. What a win this would be. And you know what this win would do? It would negate your Auburn loss. It would negate your UConn loss. But even with those, nobody's going to hold those losses against you come March. That's the big thing that I'm trying to get people to understand here. If Indiana's a bubble team, I hope the committee looks at the wins that Indiana is hopefully going to get compared to, well, they got beat by 28 against Auburn. I don't know if we can put them in. Auburn's an NCAA tournament team. Well, they got beat by 20 against UConn. I don't know if we can put them in. That's another NCAA tournament team. I'm hoping that the committee will look at it and say, wow, hope. And again, this is all the what if, the hopeful situation here. The committee looks at it and says, wow, Indiana beat Ohio State both times they played. Or, wow, Indiana beat Kansas back in December. That's a big resume win. Or a win against Purdue, right? Or any of these games, Wisconsin, right? Any of these games that you're playing that can be resume builders, the Hoosiers have to get those. You have that coming to your house this Saturday against Kansas and Bill Self and everything that people hate about Kansas basketball. That is coming to your house this weekend and a chance to get that resume building win. I know the confidence may not be high for that game. And look, that's going to be what we talk about the rest of the week here is how that game can benefit you and previewing that game. But as of right now, Kansas, they're a 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. And there's a good chance they're going to stay that way all year long. Imagine if you get this win, man, what it would do for your season and your team right now. A team that is vibes-wise and fan base-wise, the vibes are probably as low as they've been. I don't even think it was this bad after the UConn game because that was, I don't want to say that was expected, but I don't think we were expecting the Hoosiers to win. And you get beat by 20, you were in the game, you were hanging around, right? This Auburn loss was just completely different. And you were winning early, you come out, get punched in the mouth, and you get just beat like a drum by the end of it. So this is probably the lowest the vibes have been so far in this early season. That could all go away. That could all go away with a win over Kansas this weekend. And I think this could also overwrite a potential bad loss or two in the Big Ten if you happen to take one. And just making a prediction, the Hoosiers are probably going to have one somewhere. You're probably going to lose to a team that you're not supposed to, a Rutgers, right? Or any of these teams that are just not Iowa, who's 500 right now and in their regular season play, haven't even gotten really into the Big Ten yet. That's what I'm saying. Like, it's a fair prediction to say this team could drop one of those, but this win over Kansas would just completely get rid of that. And the committee will look at that win over Kansas before they say, well, they had that loss to Iowa. That's why Saturday is important. And it has a lot to do with the latest bracketology from ESPN and Joe Lunardi, updated as of yesterday. Well, coming up here on Locked On Hoosiers, we will look at head coach Mike Woodson's weekly comments on the radio show and talk about what he had to say. He talked about two things: the Michigan game, which was really great, and the Auburn game, which was not. We'll talk about what he had to say and kind of where the vibes he's given off, really, about this team and this season so far. We'll talk about that coming up in just a second here on Locked On Hoosiers. Today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs, when you're hiring for your small business, you want to have as many top-tier candidates as possible to interview. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. I've used LinkedIn. I check it periodically for people looking for jobs. And look, I take a peek in there every now and then. You never know, right? And I know my company uses it. I know so many small businesses that use LinkedIn Jobs, and they absolutely love the ease of use and the fact that you can post your job for free right now. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. Thankfully, with LinkedIn, the process is intuitive, quick, and easy. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Well, head coach Mike Woodson for Indiana basketball hopped on his weekly radio show and earlier in the week and talked about the two games from the past, the Michigan game last week and, of course, the Auburn game over the weekend. And I like to go through and break down his comments and kind of talk about what he had to say, how he breaks it down after he's had a few days to kind of break it down himself, because I think that's so key, right? We're all so emotional and we're all so caught up in the moment, whether we're on podcast or if it's the head coach, right, in a post-game press conference. The way you see things 20 minutes after a game versus how you see it 2 or 3 days after the game, or in the Michigan case, almost a week after the game, you have a different perspective. You have a chance to go and look at things and kind of think it through. And so I think it's important for us to look at that and hear what the head coach is saying about these two games. And so the things he said about the Michigan game, just some quotes from his radio show. He said, quote, "I thought we played extremely well," talking about the Michigan game. "Our bench really set the tone and making plays and kept the lead for us." That's true. He said, "I thought Walker and CJ and Caleb and Peyton, they carried us until our starters were able to get back in," which, again, we've talked about that. The difference in the Michigan game versus the Auburn game was the Michigan game, your bench was the reason you won. And in the Auburn game, he threw the bench out there to die, really, and they couldn't hold their own. And that's nothing against them. They're not supposed to. The substitutions were just weird. But he's right about the Michigan game. The bench was a huge, huge part of that. Some other quotes. He said, "These guys don't really have a clue what the Big Ten is about, the new guys." He said, "I thought our guys met the challenge. It was such a tight game. It could have gone either way." And that's not a shot at his team. That's not a shot at his bench or his young guys. He was talking about going into the Big Ten. That was, the second game they played in the conference? That one was on the road. They don't know. The only guys that really know, Trey Galloway. I mean, those guys are the seasoned veterans here, right? I mean, there's others on the team that have played in the Big Ten here, but most of the guys, you have 10 new faces this year. They don't know what's going on in this conference. And the Big Ten's a tough basketball conference. We know that. And so that's not a shot at his team. That's really giving them some credit, saying that they met the challenge. And look, they've got a lot to learn. We know that Michigan environment wasn't what we thought it was going to be. It wasn't what I thought it was going to be. I was completely wrong about that. I was kind of shocked. It was kind of embarrassing, really. But they won a 50-50 game, and I think that's what Mike Woodson is talking about right there. Said, quote, "Our inside play was the difference against Michigan. I thought Ware and Malik had their way, especially Malik down the stretch." So you're saying the way that you win ball games is use your best players in their best way, in their best format. Interesting. Kind of crazy when you think about it, right? It's crazy when Khalil Ware and Malik Reneau have their way and have the ball in their hands and you're running things through them that you are in games and have chances to win. He talked about Anthony Walker, who said he's been, quote, really steady for us. He's a senior, so we need that. Also, he praised CJ Gunn as well, who had a good game on Tuesday. I've seen some hate on CJ Gunn. I like the kid. I think he plays hard. I think he's a streaky player. I think he's up and down, but I like the kid. Here's where it starts to get interesting. Okay? Here's where it really starts to get dirty in here. And not in a bad way, but he said about the defensive miscues, probably as many miscues in a game since I've been here, and we paid dearly for it. I think it can be fixed in practice. I hope so. I think a lot of Hoosier fans are hoping so. He said it's something we can learn from. Auburn played extremely well, and you're right about that. You better learn. I mean, you better fix it, and you better learn, because that's what a game like this can be. I said that in the reaction pod late Saturday night that was posted on Sunday. You have to find a way to learn from this. And if you don't, these next few games, Kansas is going to be an outlier because that's a really good team. But those 3 or 4 non-con games that Indiana should win, that's where I have to see the growth, man. If you don't show growth and change in those games, it's over. I mean, I will be out. It'll be over for this team if you don't get better in those games and show me a little difference between what we saw against Auburn and what we could see they're moving forward for this team. He said, quote, my job is to get them to understand that when you get in a game and it's a slugfest, you have to keep fighting. And we didn't do that. He said he counted 41 miscues against Auburn. That's not going to win you ball games, folks. Let me go ahead and tell you that. That's not going to win you ball games. Said about Malik Reneau and Khalil Ware. He said the biggest area where they can work on is understanding game situations, time, score, physicality, etc. He said they were out-toughed in that game. And this is where I want to end the show today. Again, I think he's right. He's right. But guess what? To loop this back all the way to the beginning of the show, guess who that falls on? Guess whose responsibility that is to get his players to understand time, score, situation, and to be a more physical basketball team. Yeah, you want them to have some of that accountability, and you want them to have some of that awareness to make themselves better. But guess what? They didn't go and play high-level college basketball to teach themselves. They didn't go and play at one of the best programs to ever live in the game of college basketball for them to figure it out on their own. No, they came to Indiana to play for a top team, a top program in the country, and play for what they think is a really good head coach and could be one of the best in the country in Mike Woodson. If he figures it out, that is his responsibility, not theirs. That's his. That falls on the coaches. And that's where I'm going to leave it, because that's a coaching thing for me. And it brings us back to the beginning. Is there a coaching problem here? Does Mike Woodson need to look in the mirror a little bit and say, hey, I have to be better? I think he'd tell you that. I think you know that. And that's why I'm saying it here on the show. That's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers. Man, it flew by today. Hope you enjoyed it. I appreciate you being here. Shout out to the everydayers. As always, I appreciate you. You're the reason this show has been so successful. Look, they're telling me it's doing better than it has in a long time, and that's nothing against anything. We're just doing really well. Okay, you guys are supporting the show. You're here every day. You're supporting it. You're liking the video. You're subscribing to the YouTube channel. You're subscribing on audio. You're turning notifications on. If you haven't done that thing or those things, go do it right now. Go do it right now. Like the video. Subscribe on YouTube if that's where you are. If you're on your audio platform, subscribe on there, ring the bell, turn it on so that way you know when we go live. The next 2 shows, we're talking Indiana and Kansas, okay? We got a lot to cover. We got a lot to talk about. That's a big, big opportunity for the Hoosiers this weekend as the Jayhawks come in here to Bloomington to play in Assembly Hall. So that's what's on deck for the rest of the week. Be sure you check out Locked On Sports Today on YouTube as well. Drop them a subscription. They would greatly appreciate it. And as always, Hoosier fans, stay safe, and I'll talk to you later.